All right, well, welcome all to the CPC meeting of July 18th. We'll start with our traditional introductions going around the room. I'll just call on people going in the order that you appear on my screen. Nancy.
Nancy Nelson, appointee of the Historical Commission.
And Paul.
Paul Bone, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you. Eve.
Eve Eisenberg, Select Board appointee.
Okay. Edward.
Edward Larner, Housing Authority appointee.
Thank you. Sue.
And Planning Board appointee.
Okay. Diane.
Hi, Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee.
And Burton Flint, Select Board appointee as well. Okay, we have a very light agenda this evening. But Diane, did you want to ask your question about the FinCom liaison before we jump into that?
Oh, okay. I just wondered who our FinCom liaison is because it was Dee Ortner and I don't know who's going to be next. And Burton, if I can, while I have the floor, I've been attending the housing municipal let's see, the Concord Supporting Housing Trust meetings.
Right. Yes.
And we'll continue to do that for our committee. And there were several that came up today that I would love to be able, when we get to the end of our agenda, to suggest that we have on the agenda for our next meeting because they're not on our agenda at present.
Okay, that's a great idea. We'll stick that under, it's item 4, but it's labeled item 6, other business tonight. Once we get through these quick things, right? Okay. So with that, our first item is to review and approve the grant agreement for Warner's Pond. And thank you, Anne, for also providing the prior 2 grant agreements. I think I was curious about the differences between what those said in terms of what the funding could be for. And I think it would be helpful to have a little bit of discussion to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what we would need to do with the 2 prior prior grants, and then also talk about the and maybe start with talking about the current grant agreement. So I'll open the floor. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the draft MOU grant agreement for this cycle's a grant for Warner's Pond? Sue, yes.
Found a missing period.
Thank you. Okay. Let's make sure we get that added. I guess where was that at?
Oh, it was under project completion. The last, what appears to be a sentence reads, the CPC may request a site visit and/or copies of any completed studies or materials for its files. Missing period, capital P, project should, etc.
Spot on.
And is that in the template, or which paragraph was that in?
The one with the bold heading, project completion.
Project completion. Okay, let's just thank you. So I'm going to guess, Anne, that is going to be the case on every single that's in your template, right? Yeah. So Anne, did you catch that?
Yes, I did catch that. I've already sent the other MOUs out since they
wouldn't worry about it.
Right. Okay.
We will not let perfect be the enemy of the good, but just thank you, Sue, for catching that. Yep. Yes, Paul, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, just a clarification. I think I understand. The current MOU for 550,000, the project description is a bit open-ended, right? Anything that fits into ecological restoration and whatever the wording is will fit. In other words, Adelia is still deciding which direction to go. So no matter what direction she goes, the current MOU will fit that project. Is that correct?
That's how it's drafted, but I did want to talk about that point because I think it's the project update we got in the spring, and Delia, if you're maybe you can address this once I talk through my understanding. It said that there were because of the amount of the the bid that came in so over budget, they were looking at different alternatives, and that they would be following the direction based upon a vote at town meeting in 2024. And there's nothing, the language is sort of the standard language. It says we will fund in accordance with the presentation at 2023 town meeting, but I wasn't sure if it would make sense to say that the funding should be directed towards the selected alternative that will be decided through that town meeting process. So to be a little less open-ended, Paul, to your point.
Well, I think that's the intention, the direction is the same, but I think the language would be helpful because it would refer to the present state of the alternative analysis. I think that would help. It would kind of lock in the what we intended to lock in.
Right, that there's a deliberation, that there's an input, a process, and decision that's made.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if I can jump in, I think that's correct. We do have a preferred alternative that was identified in the alternatives analysis report, which is dam removal. We need to collect more information about that design, what that looks like. We also need to respond to the public comment that we received during that alternatives analysis report preparation. Last year, we had over 250, if I recall correctly, over 250 responses. We won't be responding to each individually, but we'll create categories that we respond to. So what the intention is that a portion of the money that was approved at this year's town meeting will be to begin a preliminary design of dam removal that we can then bring forward the question to town meeting for an up or down vote. Is dam removal what the town wants or not? We obviously need to collect more, we need more data, and we need more modeling to understand what that looks like, as well as being able to respond to the public comment that we've received. So that's my understanding of how we will be proceeding. And then sometime in the fall, what my plan is to come back to you. We have the 2 prior appropriations of CPA funding that are dedicated to the construction of dredging operations, which we're obviously not pursuing at this point. And so we'll be looking to request CPC's approval to bring to town meeting to reallocate those 2 CPC articles for dam removal. I don't anticipate that we'll need all that funding, but we should just do that just in case. We do anticipate that there will be a great deal of grant funding that's available. And I will also be requesting town meeting approval for the capital monies that have been appropriated for dredging to also reallocate those towards dam removal. And then whatever, at the end of the day, in a few years, if the town decides to proceed with the dam removal, and we move forward with that alternative, at the end of the day, if that is done, whatever funding has been appropriated that hasn't been spent will be reallocated to the respective buckets. So the CPC would see, whatever money comes back to you, and town budgets would receive money that has been allocated that would go back to that bucket.
Okay, that was very helpful. Yes, Edward.
My confusion is the MOU from 2020. It says it's all about dredging, and it's specifically dredging. And then the document that you presented, this spring in 2023, is changed that now to ecological improvement and so forth, so a much broader scope. Is that? Are we talking about this difference, or has it been decided? I'm just new on the board, so I'm not sure.
Right. So the goals of excuse me, the goals of the project have always been the same, which is ecological and recreational improvements. We have been looking at it to Warner's Pond, and when the application was first submitted in September, a week after we received a $9 million bid for dredging, it was to put a placeholder application in, but as the process proceeded with CPC, it was clear from the presentations that I made to the committee, and I think it was the committee's understanding that the money that was allocated by CPC would be for what the preferred alternative was, that we were looking at either dredging, a modified dredging approach of moving spoils within the pond, or a dam removal alternative, and that some of the funding that had been requested was for additional study. So what I hope to see in the MOU is that the monies can be used towards this additional study that will bring us to a town meeting vote in 2024, where we can get an answer to how the town wants to proceed.
I mean, my concern is that preservation of Warner Pond is well within our realm, whereas changing the ecological and environmental makeup of that area is not really preservation.
It's never been about preservation of Warner's Pond. It's been about improving the ecological health and the recreational capacity. And it has been always thought about as those functions and values attributed to Warner's Pond. But over the past year, the conversation has shifted to the ecological and recreational improvements to the system. So not just the pond itself, it has been sort of broadened to look at the whole system itself.
Oh, sure. And I've attended some of the meetings, and I understand quite a bit of the issues and how difficult it's going to be to retain the character there. And we also have the problem of the park that's kind of in a hiatus right now. So, and that's I think this maybe the better way to look at this funding that we have already approved is to turn that into part of the bigger project of whether it's the dam removal or even
So respectfully, that was what we did last year, was we had the alternatives analysis report prepared, and that report identified dam removal as the preferred alternative. And so that is how we are proceeding, but we recognize that it's not a decision that is going to be made by one board, any staff person. It is a vote that has to be made by town meeting, but we don't have enough information to be able to make a presentation to town meeting. So that's what we're looking to do at this point, is to sort of further the evaluation of the dam removal alternative, respond. So there was a lot of public comment, as I think including, there's a lot of question about whether or not there can be a sort of combined dredging dam removal option. And that is something that is in the request for proposals to evaluate, to answer that question. Does it, how would that be accomplished? What is the regulatory feasibility of that alternative, so that we really want to be able to work through all of these questions that people are asking and that need to be answered before we bring this to town meeting. So that's the goal of what we're hoping to accomplish before town meeting 2024.
And if I may jump in, Edward, just for the benefit, since you're new to the committee. So obviously we had been splitting up funding for two cycles. You've seen those that were dedicated towards dredging, and actually technically also at least one of them was for boat ramp improvements. But then in this last funding cycle, when we realized that dredging was looking financially infeasible. We purposely drafted it to be more open-ended. The approval that was the funding that was approved at town meeting was more open-ended to facilitate this process of considering alternatives. We didn't, the analysis hadn't proceeded far enough to dictate the spending on any particular alternative, but it was intended to allow this deliberative process. And I think the idea is that it's not CPC that's making the decision on dam removal or not dam removal, but it's there to fund the decision that's made through this planning process and the town vote.
And the end date seems to be 2027. Is that what I saw on the latest thing?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
2027 is kind of the time that these funds would be expended.
Was it that they're generally 3-year cycles? I didn't pick 3-year agreements.
So 2024 approval and then 2027, the project is completed.
Well, so this funding article, and that's just one thing to clarify, and which Delia you touched on, is that this is an approved funding the funding that was approved for disbursement, I guess, essentially now, once we get this memorandum of understanding done, and the clock is running from this time period, right? And I think that's how it should be set up, right? So from the date of this grant agreement, it would be within, well, actually, project should be completed within 30 months following town meeting approval. That's approval of this. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong grant agreement. I'm looking at the old one. Does it say that have the same language? The older one said within 30 months. Same language, yeah. So that would be from 30 months from this past spring's town meeting.
Oh, okay. I mean, this is a huge issue, so I just, I'm not trying to put any roadblocks on. I just want to understand, as long as we're not approving this or anything, but we want to be supporting, this because it's a town recreation and open space kind of issue.
Mm-hmm. Let me go to some other folks with their hands up. I think Paul, you were the first with your hand up.
But point of order.
Yes, sir.
Just occurred to me, I'm in a butter to Warner's Pond. Do I have to recuse myself from any discussion of Warner's Pond funding?
Oh.
Sure.
Yes.
And I apologize for not thinking of that earlier. And how do I know when to come back, given that it's for people waving?
Well, let me defer. I mean, maybe to Ann or Diane in your wisdom. In this, I wish we had John here because he's dealt with this issue. If you are recusing yourself, so any recusal decision is sort of on a case-by-case basis. And I know you're close by, but close enough we'll consider you in a butter. And certainly, if you think that you should be recused, I think that that's a definitive question. If you were wondering whether or not you should be, that can be a question, for, I think that can go to town staff. They can provide guidance on that. But
actually, you go to the state and you speak
the state
on it. There's somebody, and every day there's somebody who can answer those questions. In the meanwhile, Sue, what you can just do is simply mute yourself. And just not participate in the discussion, but listen to what's going on. You're not prejudicing and you won't have a vote. I think that John used to actually leave the meeting, but I've learned since in a discussion I had with town council that you don't have to leave the meeting. You just simply cannot participate in the discussion, nor by any facial gesture or kind of, you can't, don't do that. I mean, that kind of thing. So, I mean, just by now, and you may have a different view of this, but that's my understanding.
So no, I do have the same view. And when you contact the state, you are also able to complete a form. And if you complete the form explaining what the conflict could be, or the perception of conflict could be, and then you explain it at the meeting as well, at the public meeting, then you could opt to participate as well, as long as you complete the form.
Right.
Okay.
That was somewhere into hour 2 of the ethics training I just recently had to do, right?
I'll circulate that information too.
Okay, but thank you, Sue. For now, mute. All right. Paul, back to you.
Okay, I'm trying to understand the connection, well, looking ahead to next year's town meeting.
Mhm.
So I think Delia's intent is to bring forward the decision, this dam removal before the town in a separate warrant article of some sort. Does that have any impact on this particular grant agreement? Does this have to be relitigated, or the town's already voted on this? If the town decides not to proceed with dam removal, does that mean that this article becomes another Christopher Heights, and the money is then recouped or redirected? What happens to this grant?
I think it would sit out there as if the town voted against dam removal and Delia said, well, then there's not a path forward to invest in. I presume, Delia, you would say the money can go back. Otherwise, it may be for other types of ecological improvements that would have the support of the town. Because you're right, there was never a contingency in this approval that there be a subsequent town meeting vote, right, on a particular outcome. It's very general towards essentially funding ecological improvements to Warner's Pond.
Right. I think, Diane, you were involved in discussion with FinCom at the meeting. I think it was everybody's understanding that later this year, by fall, a decision will be made on the direction. I think that was that unlocked FinCom's approval on this, that there'd be some agreement by the end of this year. So, I think the answer is this. Remains to be seen what happens here, but essentially this grant agreement would not die. It could be redirected for other purposes because the goal is pretty general, right?
I think that's the case. I raised this whole discussion tonight because I was, whether we would consider saying that, it's the board's intent that this be funding this analysis, and then that proceeding with any particular solution would follow a town meeting vote. But that was not in the original proposal, Diane, unless you correct me if you think I'm wrong, that whether you said that. I think it was certainly in the discussions, Delia, you've been having with us leading up in the spring, when we were wondering how do we more clearly define this.
And in our discussions, may I say something? Or yes?
Yes, and then Eve.
In our discussions with FinCom, that was the understanding as well. And I think that I think the important thing is that we all know this will eventually come to a town meeting vote, governed and led by Delia and the Natural Resources Commission, as they further study and consummate their own understandings. So that has been at least that's been my understanding.
Okay.
Thanks.
Eve,
Yeah. Thanks. I just wanted to ask Delia if this first bullet point under conditions specific to this project meets your expectations for this MOU, that the CPA funds must be used to design, plan, or construct ecological improvements and recreational opportunities at Warner's Pond. That seems to me to include the study, the construction of a presentation for town meeting next year. Does that fit in there to your understanding?
Yes.
Delia. And then secondly, I don't even know, I'm hoping somebody will tell me I don't need to know this, but I'm sort of curious a little bit. The first two MOUs are for 750 specifically for dredging. What does those MOUs get canceled out by this one, or what happens to that 750, or do I just not need to know that?
that was going to be the next conversation tonight.
Okay.
But the short answer is they need to be it's essentially reissued, because there's language that allows for modifications to funding proposals, but if they're material, it's up to us as a committee to decide whether they're within the scope of the original funding approved by town meeting, and I would argue that they do not.
Right, I mean,
and
it's
so,
very specific for dredging. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't say for a study or a presentation or anything of the
Yeah.
sort. So we're gonna have
Right.
to deal with that. But back to your point, Burton, about whether or not we insert something in that first bullet point that says between the design plan and before the construction, there is a town meeting. I personally don't know that we need to do that if that's already in the intentions of Delia. I don't know that we need to say that about the process of this. That would be my
Okay.
opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And Delia, you have your hand raised. I don't know if that was for a point that was raised and answered, or.
I just had a question because there was some discussion about the time frame of these grants, and we have obtained funds in, I think it was 2020 and 2021 as well as 2023, and we had always intended that those monies would be put towards the construction of dredging, which we will now sort of reallocate or seek approval for reallocation. But because it's so much money, we never intended that we would spend it within the next fiscal year. We were basically banking money. And so I just, when I hear 30 months, that it has to be spent by a certain time frame, it just gives me a little, I just want to be clear that we'll spend it as quickly as we can go through the process. But if town meeting in 2024 approves dam removal, then we're going through a whole new permitting process. That's a year where, it's going to be a little bit of time. So we will probably be seeking CPC's approval to extend those. Hopefully we won't even need it and we can give all the money back to CPC. But worst case scenario, I hope it's done in 3 years, but that the time moves very quickly.
Yeah, and I don't think it's ever our intent to just cut somebody off and say, you got to give the money back. It's been 30 months. I think the idea is to try to get the CPC funding spent or utilized in a more timely manner. And if it's been out there for a while, coming back once in 30 months to ask for more time is a good checkpoint, right? But that raised the other question about if we're reconverting those other two grants to funding. You had mentioned some time period of years, just coming off of the Junction Village recycling and this, we've had between those two projects over $1 million sort of locked up for a while. And just speaking on my own behalf, one of the things that I'd like to try to steer away from is breaking up projects into multi-year requests that you get a little bit now and a little bit now and a little bit now, because that necessarily, the money always gets spent in the last year, right? And that necessarily extends the amount of time this money's just sitting out there, and I mean, earning a de minimis amount of interest, I suppose, for the committee, but it's, I would just like to see funds get utilized closer to the time of the town meeting vote for them. Anyway, yes, Paul.
Bernie, you used the term reconverting several times, and I know we're probably morphing into the next agenda topic, but reconverting sort of suggests that we converted from dredging to something else. The alternative, which I think we also discussed, is that money would go into an open space reserve, and there'd have to be a new application. Do we have to decide on which pathway we're going here?
Don't think we have to decide that tonight, but I do think we have to decide that. And I was trying to recall, and Diane, maybe you've got some insight on this. The reason that we had to do sort of a two-step jig with the Junction Village stuff, where we utilized the special town meeting to bring that money back so that it could be reallocated at the regular town meeting. I couldn't recall why that had to be done as two steps.
Well, it ended up that we were, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but we were unfortunately ill-advised. Our legal counsel said, oh, you have to do this first and then that second. Actually, we could have done it all in one swell swoop.
But we were also up against a timeline of trying to get some funding into weren't we trying to get some funding into the trust's hands before a regular town meeting?
No, actually, no, because we couldn't
No?
because of the way it worked. We first had to move it to us and then move it to them. We could have just moved it right to them.
I see.
But we didn't know that. And so we followed the advice of counsel. It ends up that we didn't need to do that. And on some independent work on our own part by talking to the Stuart Saganor and to the state, discovered that we didn't need that secondary step, which was fine. I mean, it ended up hurting no one. The trust has not used that money in any way, but there is a more expeditious way of doing this, so that what we could do is, of course, it depends on what we're going to move the money to. But if we're using, so that I guess we have to wait and see kind of how this all evolves. But let's make a hypothetical situation. Let's say that Delia comes to us and says, well, actually, I now need that money to take down the dam because there is state money, but not enough. And so we would then have to take that money and reallocate it to the Natural Resources Commission. But we could do that in one swell swoop.
Okay. Or conceivably, if Delia relinquished it, we could, put it into a open space reserve or any other
general fund. Absolutely.
Delia, I'm sure you're totally in the loop on this, but I think it was a week or so ago hearing on the radio talking about all the federal funding that's right now being really directed towards dam removal projects. Sounded like there was is an opportune time to try to get federal funds. Okay. Unless anybody else has any other comments or questions, I just want to rehash. I think that my sense from comments was that we didn't need to add an additional guidance statement into this grant agreement. And so then, while this has been a great conversation, our one change is to fix the punctuation. Thank you, Sue. We will not consider that a breach of your recusal, having suggested the correction there. Am I correct in that point? Okay, and then going forward, I guess, Delia, that process around the guidance on what to do. I mean, obviously, you're part of that discussion in terms of the guidance on what to do with those two prior grant agreements, and it would be great to be able to deal with all of that at once, so that there would be, probably a separate article, but with your support of converting those into, a different, a modified appropriation. That's the right word, modified.
Right. So I apologize. I meant to give this a lot more thought before the meeting tonight, and I don't have like I have my ideas about how this should work, but obviously I would like to, have CPC's opinion on this, as well as I'd like to run it by town council. But what my thoughts are is that I bring a request to the CPC well in advance of the warrant closing. So sometime this fall, early fall, I bring a request to you seeking CPC approval to take those two prior authorizations, as well as whatever is remaining from the 2023 appropriation, and ask CPC's approval to dedicate that to dam removal, permitting, design, survey, construction, all of those possibilities, and seek your approval so that then we can make that, we can bring that as a warrant article, or I guess CPC would bring that as a warrant article. I'm not even sure about who would bring that. But somebody would bring that forward as as you did with Junction Village, to seek to shift the funding from one way to another, which obviously we need to do because dredging and dam removal are two totally different things.
Right.
That generally sounds right. I think there'll be the details to work through once we've given it some more thought, but that generally sounds right. Paul, yeah, you've got your hand up.
The path sounds excuse me, a little risky to me, in that if you approach CPC with sort of a conversion to dam removal this fall, that's in advance of bringing the whole dam removal question in front of town meeting. So if town meeting rejects dam removal, basically they reject all of the money. And
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this I had thought about, and you just take one article before the other and you don't move the other one. I mean, all the money right now is tied up in dredging. And there is some money for additional studies, which is what we're going to proceed with this fall. But if we do not move an article at town meeting, 2024, everything stops again for 1 year. So it's just in the order of the articles, how they're taken. If the CPC article follows the dam removal question, then that article is not moved.
okay, that makes sense. So, yeah, I didn't realize that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
So we'll just need to make sure we connect with the town moderator on that, or
Yeah,
I presume it's the town moderator that decides the order of articles, right?
Well, she advises the select board. The select board does it, but Carmen advises them, and they can do it ad seriatim. So it's one, and then goes the next one. So,
right.
Okay. Okay. So I think then we're ready for a vote then to approve as modified to add that missing period, the MOU grant agreement for Warner Pond. Do I have a motion for that for approval? I saw Diane raise her hand first. I'll now go around the room. Paul, how do you vote?
Yes.
Diane.
Yes, but I think we needed a second. Nancy seconded
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much procedurally. Nancy seconded it. Paula, yes. Diane.
Yes.
Nancy. You're on mute.
I'm sorry for the delay.
Great. Sue's recused. Edward.
Aye.
Eve.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So that's unanimous. Okay, and then we will be having more discussions on the conversion of the other two as that plan gets hashed out, and happy to discuss that with you anytime, Delia. So thank you very much for coming to answer our questions this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, I think that brings us to our next item, which was closeouts. We've got the Emerson Field greatly improved closeout documentation. Did anybody have any comments or feel anything else was needed for the Emerson Fields project summary that we got, showing how the funds had been spent and so forth?
No.
I will tell you, I sometimes struggle to see what changed at Emerson Field aside from the nice new sidewalk around by the tennis courts. But I stand out there and I look and I remember them showing me the hazards of the field, and then I think, where? I guess that's good when it's new and you don't notice that it's all been improved and given new life. I would say our flagpole looks very nice.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, then, and do we need votes on closeouts, or is that just a procedural that then you need my signature on that? I can't remember from last time.
Well, I think it's an either or, so it might be easier on you actually if the committee takes a vote on all of them, and then we can just
save me the trip across town. Okay,
exactly right.
That'd be great. All right, and let's just do them both together because I think it'll probably be the same. The other one is the Holy Parish one, which had some nice pictures. It didn't really. There were a couple things I was wondering about. Presumably I think the original grant proposal was specific to that really nice roof. I think was what our funding was supporting, and it didn't really say that, but it did show that the work had been done. Certainly, the other thing I was wondering about was the public access to the meeting space. And Diane, you've got your hand up. Whether there was any sort of statement on that, whether this would be a good time to reconnect, because sometimes the building committee that offers that stuff up is not the same as the operational folks. And Diane,
yeah, that's really important because several organizations have tried to have a meeting there, and it has not been an easy thing to accommodate. So I think reminding the program that was part of the original understanding In fact, it was essential because we could not have funded it really otherwise.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
So,
Um,
oh, sorry. Would you like me to explain? I did reach out to them.
okay, that'd be lovely.
Okay. So I did reach out to Mark Giddings and
and I'm sorry. So, Anne, were you saying you did reach out to them, or
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have, right. And so Mark Giddings said that they didn't have the occupancy permit. So there was a delay on that. So they did have a temporary one. It was finally opened in November. I think they finally do have the final occupancy permit. He wasn't even quite sure himself. But in the meantime, they did open it up to the Concord 250th anniversary committee. And he said he'd be back to me or to us and would, be submitting, the organizations, a list of organizations as they come in.
Because originally the Concord 250 found that it was not available. So this is good news.
Great. Okay, so then with that, shall we do I make a motion that we approve both of the closeout forms? And can I get a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. And Paul, are you in favor?
Yes, I am.
All right, Nancy?
Aye.
Eve?
Yes, and I can't believe you didn't notice the new playground turf in the Emerson Field. Come on, Burton.
I am just about 5 years removed from noticing the playground turf.
Okay.
Wistfully, I say that. Diane?
Yes, aye.
Edward?
And I also would like to note that the name should stay Emerson Field. I know some of the signage just said Emerson Park.
Oh, really?
No.
And
Good
now
catch.
you've piqued my interest. Is this an issue of some?
I just come over there a lot, and I just noticed it was, when the construction was going on, they were referring to it as Emerson Park.
But and has the signage been changed to that?
I haven't seen any other, so I'm a preservationist.
Well, it's interesting to note. One of the things that I did not recall about the project as proposed, but that what was something that was added was a storage shed. And it struck me that I was surprised that just sort of went in, because I bet a lot of people care that the viewscape of that park, or that field, pardon me, remain as much as, that it does not change dramatically. I was thinking about it, and I'm now there frequently for track meets. My son runs track in high school, and the restroom facilities are not what you would want. And I thought, well, maybe there could be fundraising for that, but I can't imagine. I bet a lot of people would not want a permanent building built there.
Does everyone know that the Patriots, when they were first formed, used Emerson Field for their practice and had shower room built in the armory?
That's right.
And so the shower room is still in the armory that the Patriots used when they were just forming. So there's another reason to be nostalgic about Emerson Field.
And isn't the armory being restored, right?
Well, there's a lot of work going on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the fate of the shower room will be. It's very interesting.
And by the Patriots, she does not mean the original.
No, I don't.
Just for the record.
The Minutemen didn't have a locker room over there.
No,
it ends up they didn't.
no, our guys. Yeah, it was interesting.
Before I lose the thread too much, Sue, how do you vote on the two closeouts?
My hand was poised over the raise hand button in case we moved on.
No, I got it. And I'm also a yes. So Anne, hopefully that mitigates for needing a signature. With that, we're through our regular agenda. We've got other business. So Diane, do you want to go back to consider the point you raised at the beginning? And then we can also ask if Linda's got any comments?
I would be grateful. In attending I'm trying to attend for the committee all of the Concord, the Housing Trust Fund meetings. Linda's also, of course, because she's on the committee there, but several things came up tonight that are pretty important. They would like, and Linda can correct me if I'm misunderstanding, they would like us to think about earmarking going forward in the future. And it's something that would require discussion. So this would have to go on an agenda. Earmarking a certain amount of money that they could count on coming from affordable housing every season for CPA in terms of their forecasting and budget building. The amount of money they recommended was $420,000 if it were a $2 million budget, about 21%. We've actually given more than 21% in the past, but that's something for us to consider whether we want to be beholden to or in a kind of an ongoing relationship with the trust that would be on which money on which and funds on which they could count in their long range planning. And the second thing is that apparently they tried to contact us about the roundtable discussion, and they would like that to be on the 14th or the 16th of August. And this is a housing roundtable. Burton, I think they reached out to you, but maybe it didn't go to your regular email. It may have gone to spam, but Keith.
I actually think I saw an email on that and meant to respond to it and then never got back to it. So this was just asking what dates works for the committee. And actually now I recall the thought that came through my mind is I should come to this meeting and ask what date works for the committee.
Yeah. I just quickly tell you that the 15th, we have a CPC meeting.
Okay, so
in between those two dates, 14th and 16th, there's a scheduled CPC meeting on the 15th. So I know they would appreciate hearing from us about which of those dates would work best. The 14th is a Monday and the 16th is a Wednesday in August. Linda, did I get all of this right?
You certainly did. You certainly did.
Okay.
Okay. So and is the hope that we're showing up with a quorum or just that some members or portion of the membership shows up to participate?
Not necessarily a quorum, but
okay.
Because I've often attended these meetings and there's been one or two people from our committee in attendance. I think what they're hoping is that the interests of CPC, our knowledge, our experience, our history can be part of the roundtable conversations. As they look forward to how but this is a meeting, and again, Linda can help me, in which they want to discuss with all of the housing organizations how that money is used in the future. You know, what is the best use of their monies? And they would really appreciate CPC's, if not their direct input, certainly their well-honed ears, you know, to what those plans might be or how they might imagine going forward. Linda, is that correct?
That is correct. And I think everyone on your committee received a list of what the existing projects are, known projects are right now that everyone will be looking at.
I received it, but I don't know if anyone else did. And Keith sends it.
I don't think so.
The meetings. I don't think so, Linda.
Okay. Anyway, that will.
Right, I haven't seen that either.
Okay.
But if I receive it, I will certainly circulate it to everyone.
That'd be great.
Do you want me to circulate my copy of it to Anne?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be fine.
Okay, I'll try to do that right now while we're on. So those were the things, Burton, I wanted to bring up. So
thanks so much, Diane. So I'll get back to Elizabeth right away on dates, but it's right now it looks like I would be able to attend on either the 14th or the 16th. Does anybody else who wants to be at that, who wants to participate in that roundtable discussion, have a preference?
No preference.
I would recommend that we do Monday so we can talk about what's important to us on our meeting on Tuesday, given that we're now going to be asked to, you know, all these other things that Diane just said.
Okay.
Round might be equally helpful for us to meet first and discuss it. So we bring that point of view to Wednesday. Which do you think is more helpful?
Well, I'm not, maybe I haven't seen the right documents yet, but I'm not sure what it is that we would discuss at our meeting. Like, would we have their agenda and that we'd be discussing their agenda ahead of time, or?
Well, we'd be able to see the various projects on which they're deliberating.
I see. Oh yeah, that's probably a better idea then.
I mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying that the other advantage is that we would discuss it ahead of time and bring points of view to that meeting. I mean, either one, I think.
Okay. All right. I'll let her know. Okay, my quick feedback on the standing allocation, it certainly could be, I guess, written into our, we revisit, what is that document, Diane, that is sort of our big procedural guide that we follow, that we update from time to time. We update it seems like each year. What is that document called? It's a CPC charter of some sort.
I don't know if it's,
Procedure?
I don't think it's, I didn't realize it was a charter, and maybe it is. I mean, it really is just a protocol for going forward, how we.
Protocol. Yeah, and I guess we could put it into that. I am hesitant for actually the same thing when I mentioned extending out funding over multiple cycles. I feel like each committee that constitutes itself, each year, it's slightly different each year, and that's the decision-making body for the funding in front of us. And it's not. I'd be happy to be convinced otherwise, but I feel like it's not up to me to bind a committee 5 years from now that I have nothing to do with, or even next year's committee, that will have most of the same faces, but not all of them. That's my view.
I just think it's always good in the beginning of the year to just go over that document and review it and make sure everybody's familiar with it. What do you think, Burton?
Well, certainly, yeah, going through that document, but whether we're writing into that document that it's the committee's intent that a certain percentage be earmarked, I would, that wouldn't be my preference, but I don't feel dogmatic about it.
I didn't think it was your preference, but it was the request that we discuss it. So I just think it's something we should be thinking about. That's all.
Yeah. Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just think we should have a fuller discussion of this at the next meeting. There are a lot of worthwhile projects. I think our history is quite generous and appropriately so for housing. But we have the middle school fields, and we have 5 years from now there could be other worthwhile projects. And we may need some flexibility, and our successors may need that flexibility. To your point.
Yeah. I would note, I think there was that article talking about, and maybe we previously discussed this, the failure of a lot of towns to use community preservation funds for housing, and we're not on that list of towns that are failing to do that. We've done a pretty good job as it stands.
In fact, we're rather leaders in that regard.
Yeah. Sue.
Well, we seem to be straying into a lot of discussion, and I wonder if we should hold that for a time when the topic is actually on the agenda.
Sure. I mean, yes, fair point. I mean, we've got the catch-all other business at the end, and I really appreciate this. We'll call it an extended liaison report from Diane.
Things have to be on the agenda and not just as other business, so that the public can reasonably expect, et cetera. But yes, extended report from Diane.
Yes.
Very good.
Does anybody else dare make a comment on that prior to? Just kidding. Or does anybody else have anything else? Otherwise, Linda, if you've got any feedback or comments you'd like to relay.
Yeah, thank you very much. So listening to an earlier discussion this evening about wondering what the situation was with Holy Family Parish in terms of public access to the site. I'm wondering if that's something that should be captured very briefly in the final closeout report, what the public access is. Just a thought.
It's a good one. I would be happy to put something in that report that says, the committee reminds or reiterates the commitment of the applicant to make the facility available to the public. I think where would we have, and this was before your time, but have memorialized that in the first instance? Was that in the grant agreement, the MOU? It probably was, because as you pointed out, Diane, it was so important to the being able to make the funding to show the public benefit.
And for people who are new to the committee, the reason that was important is that it had to be One of the things that we want always to do when we're supporting any kind of upgrade in a facility is that it then becomes a public asset rather than just a private asset.
Plus, it's a religious facility, right?
You're right.
We had that funding cycle. We had both the that roof and also restoration of the clock in the and the Unitarian building, and so a lot of discussion around that, and discovered that was originally actually the town's clock.
That's right.
Yeah. When the select board was the ombudsman of the church.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No separation yet.
Yeah.
I would
Yes,
just
Nancy.
say, I would just say part of that discussion, I think that at the time the church provided a very extensive list of the organizations that had used and would continue to use the facility. It may have changed a little bit because I believe a lot of the church offices moved over there. So I don't know. I mean, it's a good question how much public access will remain there, I think.
Well, given that and Linda's suggestion, shall we insert what's the sense of the board, just on a quick hand raise? It makes sense to insert that like a sentence that as a reminder. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's clear majority of us. So I'm just going to flip back to it. That was the let's see. I don't have it open. Give me one moment. I'm just going to look for where like an appropriate place might be. I mean, there's not any sort of written summary. So how so project, I guess we just insert into the checklist, probably right above the for lack of a better place above that, the check boxes that we've closed out the project right above the signature lines, and we could insert a sentence that's, I sort of paraphrased it, but that the committee
Reminds the organization, right, of their responsibility of their responsibility and commitment
to provide public access for varied committees and organizations.
Right.
Right. I think that does it.
I have one question about this.
Yes, please.
Are you done? Okay. At some point, I would really like to know if we could put town council memos from the last few years together, so that we could refer to some of these issues. Town council did opine about this project and other projects, including, I think, the bell tower. But I wanted to go back and see exactly what he was saying about what would be appropriate for supporting a church, which I thought the rectory sign was going to be moved to the side. I don't remember what was going to happen with the crosses on the front, but
we never got them removed. The crosses on the front were never removed.
No, and the rectory sign is it's a beautiful stained glass window. I would have hoped that they might have been able to cover it up, but they originally had told us that it was going to be relocated to the side door.
That's right.
So I just would like to go back and check what our guidelines are for funding religious, but public good. facilities.
This was particularly important for anyone who's new or relatively new to the committee because there was a lawsuit. And I believe, help me, I think it was in Acton.
Yes, it was.
A lawsuit that a citizen brought against the CPC for funding a church. And because it was not a separation of church and state. And we were apprehensive that we would face the same kind of lawsuit. So we very scrupulously sought town council on how we should proceed with these two requests.
Mhm.
And I think, Nancy, you're very right. I mean, if we had those on record, it would be a good.
I usually save things like that, but I could not find them.
I have no idea where they are. But I don't think we ever saw them in writing. We heard them orally.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was
no.
going to say, did we have memoranda?
I don't think
I remember written town council opinions about all the projects. Not just religious ones, but I can't.
I've seen it in writing. That's interesting.
Right, I'm
So-
sure we have them on file here. And I don't believe, I think that town council memos, at least in the city of Waltham, were not for the public record, that they're internal documents. But everyone on the committee obviously would be able to come in and take a look at them.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about is
That's my understanding.
putting
yeah.
them on the website. It's
Right.
Oh, that's fine, as long as we know where to find them.
I'd have to check and see whether the legality of posting it
Yeah,
on the website. Mhm.
Not urgent.
it would probably add a lot to the cost of getting one of those memos delivered if we started putting them on the internet. If I know if I would, they might, yeah, they would get quadruple checked by the hour.
Yeah.
Okay. So Anne, are you square then on the Holy Parish document? Okay. Well, great. I think we've gotten right through our agenda in 61 minutes this evening. So that is
Pretty
close to a
impressive.
record, perhaps. All right. Well, thank you
Yeah.
all.
One quick
Yes,
question.
Diane?
Is the representative from the NRC is once again going to be? Who?
I haven't heard.
Okay.
So who,
Let's
let's see. So the NRC representative was whom?
Sarah.
Sarah. Oh,
Sarah-
right.
Sarah Grimwood, Dr. Sarah Grimwood. And so I just was hoping she was again going to be in our midst, but she's not here tonight. And I just wondered if they've appointed someone.
Her term on our website is through May 31st, 2024.
Yes.
So, and
But
actually,
She may
I'm
also
just,
be becoming the chair, Burton. And so that
yeah,
so I just know that was what was partly on her mind, but it's something we should look into, I think.
I'm also just noticing that Nancy, your term on the website is listed as ending on April 30th, 2023. Is that an administrative thing we just need to update?
That my appointment to the historical commission was extended. And I'm a
Okay.
representative of the historical commission, so my assumption was that that would carry over here.
So Anne, could we just make sure that that gets updated? I know that that's one of Henry Dane's things. He wants to make sure all our committee lists are up to date.
Yeah, he tried to, yeah, Henry was great. Okay,
Nancy, aren't you an associate member now of the Historical Commission?
yeah,
I'm not sure if that matters, but
Yeah.
I'll find out.
I'm here.
All right.
And not going anywhere, we hope.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
Glue
Okay.
her down.
What?
Glue her down.
Oh, dear.
Okay, well, then with that, I guess, and just the other piece, figuring out whether Sarah's still going to be, or if we need a new person in her role, that would be great, especially given all the NRC stuff that we're going to be talking about this fall.
That's what I was thinking. It's really important.
It is.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining. I think we're done, and with that, I will declare the meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
you.
Night.